Hello and welcome. I am Scrapperlock and this is Ironsworn, Antarctica. So I am going to start a new Let's Play with the tabletop role-playing game Ironsworn. This is a tabletop role-playing game by somebody named Sean Tompkin. It's based on an engine called the Powered by the Apocalypse engine, and you'll see how that works as we get into it. This is a game specifically designed to be able to be played with a game master or cooperatively without a game master, where you let the die rolling and the very many oracles that Sean created kind of drive the narrative forward the way a GM would. And since you don't need a GM to play with multiple people, you can also play it solo. Now, I've dipped my toe in the water 2 other times with Ironsworn, and I just couldn't get into it for a couple of reasons. Some of it having to do with the mechanics. There are a couple of mechanics that I'm not happy with, and I've house ruled those, and I'll talk about that a little bit. And then I also wanted to create my own world, which you can see right here, or at least my own continent. And so I'm going to dive into this. This is going to be our session 0, and we'll create our character. I've got the initial beginnings of the ideas, but the idea with Ironsworn, as Sean likes to say on page after page, is play to find out what happens. Play to see what occurs. So I'm not going to create too much starting material, just the basic backstory, and then we're going to start rolling dice and see what happens. So first I want to begin by talking about some of the changes I've made, and the first one is this map that you see here. So this is a map of Antarctica in a sort of modified to not have any ice on it anymore. So there are various models on the internet of what Antarctica would look like if there were no ice. The ground has been so covered with ice for so long, and it's so heavy that it's pushed Antarctica down. So even if there were no ice, you wouldn't have this much land. It would be more like large islands. But someone did a really cool map online where they said, let's imagine 30 million years went by and the land rebounded. Here's what it would look like. So that is what the Antarctica on this alternate Earth is like. It's a very cold place, a very forbidding place, the way the regular Ironlands are in the normal game of Ironsworn. And there's a lot of snow and everything, but I've created my own version of this continent as opposed to the original. So let me show you quickly what the original map looked like. So this is the original map. And as you can see, there are several areas. It's kind of derived from Greenland, and from the havens north, it's a very cold, harsh place. The havens are kind of like southern Canada, and then as you go further north, it's even colder. So we have the flooded lands, which is an area of swamp. We have the deep wilds, where the Ironlands version of elves and werewolves live. We have the ragged coast, the barrier islands, the hinterlands, the Tempest hills, the veiled mountains, and the shattered wastes. And if you look at my map of the Ironlands, we have all of those things here. What I really like about Antarctica, though, if you take a look at the compass on each side of the map, I've got the compass facing north toward the edge of the page, and that's because we're at the South Pole. And so the shattered wastes are at the South Pole. It's not actually correct, kind of where, a little above where the A in Havens is over here, if you can see the cursor, is actually where the actual North Pole is, where in terms of the position of Antarctica. But I moved it around a little bit just to make the map a little more balanced. So in this world, the South Pole is where the shattered wastes are, and it's always incredibly frigid and cold there. The really tall, snowy, veiled mountains surround the shattered wastes. This is somewhat accurate in the sense that there is a lot of altitude in this part of Antarctica for real. I did have a map with like the relief maps that I could trace when I was building this map. So it's close, but I took a bunch of fictional liberties with it. We then have the Hinterlands and the Tempest hills. They're not positioned relative to the havens the way they are on the other map. That's okay. The Hinterlands is sort of a rough area of trees and low hills. The Tempest Hills is an area of a lot more tall hills and low mountains, really, and fewer trees. And then you have the Flooded Lands, which is full of rivers and swamps and stuff. And of course, we have the havens and the ragged coast and the barrier islands. And one of the reasons I chose this map is because there are these barrier islands and a ragged coast that really work well in terms of the Ironlands. And then we have the deep wilds, which is where the elves and the werewolves live. And then I added another one because kind of the way this works is that, because the cold is in the center and then we go out in rings, right? That the right directly around the Veiled Mountains, it's cold, right? Which is why I put pine trees in this area of the deep wilds and in this area of the hinterlands and this area over here and this area over here by the havens. But then there's a flat area on both sides, on the right and the left, both to the north, so I can't say east and west. And I thought about having them be like the east and west havens, or like the clockwise and counterclockwise havens, or I tried havens 1, havens 2. I couldn't figure it out, and I just said, no, the havens is where the people who first arrived here landed, and the Howling Steppes is on the other side of the continent, and they haven't been there, and there's a bunch of scary stuff over there. So there are settlers in possibly the Flooded Lands, the Tempest Hills, some of the Hinterlands, and the Havens, Ragged Coast and Barrier Islands that are human. The Deep Wilds are in sort of like elves and supernatural creatures called the Firstborn. They were here on the continent when humans arrived, and they deeply resent the arrival of humans, so they're hostile toward us. And then I don't know what we're going to find in the Howling Steppes, because that doesn't exist in the Ironlands in the original map, and so we'll find out as we go. Our main character is going to start sort of over here in above the H of Havens, near the mountains in the forest. And it's a cool area, but not super cold, and that's where we're going to start. So when you're building Ironsworn, in building the Ironlands, you are first asked to come up with the world truths. What was the world like before people came to the Ironlands? So the idea is people lived in the other parts of the world, in this case, the other continents, Africa, Asia, Europe, and so on. And then something happened that caused some, or maybe all of the people in this place to flee those areas and end up in the Ironlands. There are all kinds of variants in this. Trevor Duvall had the Ironlands actually be like a penal colony, where sort of like Australia, where they would dump their prisoners, and then they stopped doing that, and the people who are left are kind of like the descendants of the penal colony, the way kind of the Australians are. So you can do this any way that you want. So let's go through these world truths, and we will talk about them one by one. So there are various options. I won't go over all the options. We'll just look at the options that we have selected. The first one I have is one that I made up. This is not one of the 3 choices that Sean gives you, and he tells you you're free to make up your own, of course. It's a role-playing game. You do what you want. But this is one that I came up with, and I like it because there's a mystery involved. The Great Cataclysm moved like a horrible tsunami across the old world, shaking the world to its very foundations and killing all in its path. Thousands fled aboard ships. However, most could not outrun the devastation. Many ships capsized or were shattered by the great force of the cataclysm. Most were forever lost. In the end, a few reached the remotest continent at the very southern pole of the world and made their new home there, calling it the Ironlands. There are those among us who say we will forever be cursed by those we left behind. Others say no one is left alive to curse us. And then I then end with a question. What was the Great Cataclysm? Did it truly destroy everything in the rest of the world, or are there some survivors? Will new waves of refugees one day appear in the Ironlands? I don't know the answer to this. It will happen. The answers will come out during play. So I made some notes to myself about how I don't really know what the Great Cataclysm is. Perhaps it was a series of volcanic eruptions. Maybe it was an alien invasion. Maybe it was some sort of a Lovecraftian horror that got awakened and wiped everybody out, like Nyarlathotep, or however you say his name. So I don't know. We'll have to see. And I do want to mention, you're going to see this is all being done in OneNote. There are virtual tabletops that exist for this game. One's really cool called the Augury, but it adds a little bit too much automation, and I want to roll physical dice and do my own take on everything. So anyway, the old world was destroyed by a cataclysm, and what's left This is about 80 years later after everybody fled and landed in the Ironlands. So we're a couple of generations past in the year 80 YI, Year of Iron, and we're going to go from there. Iron. Why do we call this the Ironlands? Well, in this case, I like this one. Inscrutable metal pillars are found throughout the land. They are iron gray and smooth as river stone. No one knows their purpose. Some say they are as old as the world. Some, such as the Iron Priests, worship them and swear vows upon them. Most make the warding sign and hurry along their way when they happen across one. The pillars don't tarnish, and even the sharpest blade cannot mark them. And he gives us a quest starter here, which we probably won't use in this playthrough. And one of the things I want to mention is I plan on doing multiple campaigns in this version of the Ironlands. If this character dies, I'll just make up another one. Or if this character completes his vows, I will make up another one. In terms of legacies, before the Ironlanders, even before the Firstborn, another people lived here. Their ancient ruins are found throughout the Ironlands. So somebody lived here. And what I'm kind of thinking is that much like many parts of the real world, this version of Antarctica, the Ironlands, Antarctica, this version goes through melts and thaws, right, and freezes. And so there was a civilization, and then it froze over, and then it melted, and then the Firstborn came, and now the Ironlanders, the humans, are here. And so the ruins are what's left from before the last quote-unquote Antarctic ice age. In terms of communities, they are few in number. Most rarely have contact with anyone outside of our own small village or steading, and strangers are viewed with deep suspicion. And that's going to have some implications for our character. Leadership. It's as varied as the people. Some communities have a head of a powerful family, some have a council, some have priests. Sometimes it's duels to see who gets to rule. In terms of defense, there's a group called the Wardens. They are guards, soldiers, and militia. They serve their communities. They patrol the lands. There are free wardens that are wandering mercenaries who hire on to serve a community or protect caravans. I like this idea. And if this character doesn't survive, I might make a free warden. Sounds kind of like a paladin. Mysticism. Magic is rare and dangerous, but those few who wield the power are truly gifted. And you'll see there are quest starters. These are quest starters that Sean gives you. We may use one of these as our Inciting Incident. We'll see. I am going to use one of them as the background vow for this character. We're about to get to that. Religion. A few Ironlanders still make signs and mumble prayers out of habit or tradition, but most believe the gods have long ago abandoned us. I don't know what the gods are for this universe. We will randomly generate that when we need them. The Firstborn. The elves, the Varu, which are like werewolves, the giants. The Firstborn have passed into legend, some say. The remnants of the old tribes still dwell in the deep forests or the high mountains, but most believe they were never anything more than myth. So the people in the havens do not really believe, most of them, that these elves even still exist in the deep wilds, but they're afraid to go in there because it's dangerous. Beasts, and this one is our background vow. The beasts of old are nothing but legend. A few who travel into the deep forests and high mountains return with wild tales of monstrous creatures, but they are obviously delusional. No such things exist. And here is the background vow. So every character has a background vow that's supposed to be an epic vow, which means it takes like 40 quests to finish it, and I'll show you how that works shortly. And that vow, the idea is once you finish that vow, you've kind of completed the character. You've got to level 20 of D&D, that kind of thing. So you were a witness to an attack by what you thought was an animal of monstrous proportions. No one believes you. In fact, you are accused of the murder you blame on this beast. How can you prove your innocence? Can you even trust your memories of the event? So this is definitely going to be the one we're going to use. This character was out with a friend. He's a hunter, and he was out with a friend, and they were beset by this beast, by this monstrosity, which we're going to generate right here in a few minutes. And he was wounded, the main character, and the friend was killed. And when he got back to the village did not believe him. So I'm kind of thinking of this guy sort of a little bit like Hagrid from Harry Potter, and spoiler alert for the Harry Potter novels, but Hagrid was accused of being guilty in the death of a girl at Hogwarts that he did not do. It was the basilisk that killed the girl. In fact, it was Moaning Myrtle that the basilisk killed. But Hagrid was blamed for it by Tom Riddle. And so he is not trusted by many people, but he has a few friends. For example, Dumbledore believed Hagrid and kept him on as gamekeeper. And so, as you're going to see with our character, whose name is Wiglaf, and we'll see in a minute, our character has a couple of friends who believe him, and most of the people in the town do not. And they think that he killed his friend. And so he wants to clear his name, redeem his honor, and he also wants to get revenge on this beast, right? And prove that it's there. Finally, there are horrors. These are like undead. We are wary of dark forests and deep waterways, for monsters lurk in those places, in the depths of the long night. When all is wreathed in darkness, only fools venture beyond their homes. And I love this idea of the long night, because the long night exists in the Antarctic, right? There are whole months when it's just night, and that's when these horrors come out. Now, I don't know what time of year we're going to be starting. I think to make it easier on ourselves, we're going to start in one of the transition periods, either spring or fall. Of course, spring would be in like October or so, or fall, which would be like in May, April. And so the idea is we'll get to the transition period, and then we're either going to go into the, weeks of day or a weeks of night. So we'll see what happens. So that's kind of the world truths that we're working with. And now what we have to do is generate our character. So let's take a look at this. This is our character. He's Wiglaf of, don't know the name of this settlement yet. And I've got some numbers up here. I'm going to be using the more generous array. This is actually recommended by Sean Tompkin if you're playing solo, that you might want to go with the 4-3-3-2-2 array rather than the default 3-2-2-1-1. Basically what this is you have 5 characteristics: edge, which is like agility or dexterity; heart, which is kind of like will or bravery; iron, which is strength and fortitude; shadow, which is sneakiness and stealth; and wits, which is intelligence. And these characteristics are added to your roll. So if it says to make an edge roll and your edge is 3, you roll your die and you add 3. To roll dice in Ironsworn, you roll your action die, which is a 6-sided die. So it can go from numbers 1 to 6, plus whatever your bonuses are. So if you're adding these bonuses, the total will be somewhere between 3 and 10, depending on which bonuses you're adding. And then you roll 2 what are called challenge dice. The challenge dice are what you're trying to beat, and they're both D10. So you roll 1 die, and you roll against the 2 challenge dice. And if you roll your die and your total with your addition, right, your roll of 4 plus 2 is a 6, and the challenge dice give you 1 and 3 or something. If you're above both challenge dice, it's a strong hit. It's an out-and-out success, right? It's like yes and bonus. So it's like you get what you wanted and a little bit more. If you roll below both dice, that's a miss, and that means you fail, and you fail badly. And you often have to do something called paying the price. And then finally, if you get a number that's between the two, so you're higher than one die, lower than the other, that's a partial success. It's called a weak hit. You get a plus and a minus. You get a yes, but something also negative happens. And so you want to roll with your best stat as much as possible, and so you want to kind of arrange the character so that they're usually using your best stat, and we'll talk through that as we play the game. So you can see the character sheet, and along with the character sheet, I've got a bunch of these links here. I've hot linked all this stuff in OneNote, so if I have to ask the Oracle something, I can just click on this, go to Ask the Oracle, and then go right back to the player character. This is all stuff I screenshotted, and it took me like several days to do this so that it'd just be quick and easy to play. I don't have the whole rule book in OneNote, so I may have to pause and look things up, but a lot of the basics are here. So Wiglaf is the name of the character. Wiglaf is a character from Beowulf, and so I decided that the character who died, his friend, is named Honshu, which is the character that Grendel killed in the first part of Beowulf when they were in Harrot Hall waiting to ambush the beast, and then after that Beowulf ripped his arm off. And so there's this friend of Wiglaf's was named Honshu, and he was killed by the beast. So one of the things, I've got to move this. One of the things that, whoops, I made a mistake there. One of the things that that you have to do in Ironsworn is make vows, and this is how the game moves forward. You swear a vow on iron. You hold a piece of iron, because iron has magical powers in the Ironlands, perhaps because of these iron pillars, perhaps just because of the land itself, perhaps because of the magnetism of the South Pole. We don't know. We may learn about that as we go, but it has magical power, where if you swear a vow, it binds you to that vow. And people take that as a very important thing. If you say, I will swear iron to do this for you, that means you really mean it. So every character proceeds by doing vows, and vows can be either troublesome, dangerous, formidable, extreme, or epic. And what this means is, you see that there are these boxes here, check boxes, and this is telling you how many boxes you check for completing milestones on your quest. So a vow is like a quest in an MMO or something, and you have steps, and you have to complete all the steps to finish the vow. And it takes up to 10 steps. You can sometimes complete them early, but it could take up to 10 boxes that have to be checked. In a troublesome vow, you check like 3 boxes for each step. So you take 3 steps and you're nearly done with the quest. In a dangerous vow, you check 2 boxes. In a formidable vow, you check 1. In an extreme vow, you check a box every 2 times you reach a milestone. And in an epic, it's 4. You have to basically check. It's like having 40 boxes. And so this background vow that he has is to find and slay the monstrous beast and clear my name and redeem my honor. That's an epic vow. That means he's going to have to basically make 30 or 40 steps in order to achieve this vow. He's got a lot of work to do. The other vow you need is an inciting incident, which we will work out as we go. But first, I want to sort of create the character. So before we do anything else, I have picked assets for him. So these are cards. You can choose 3 cards. The assets are combat talents, paths, sort of a discipline, companions, like pets, and rituals, which is magic. Now, this guy doesn't have any magic, Wiglaf. He is more of a hunter and a fighter. So he has 3 assets. One is, since he's alone, I thought he would get himself a pet to have some company, because he's got a few friends, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but most of the town nearby they're not speaking to him because they think he's a murderer. So he got a husky that he named Griff, and Griff is his hound. And when you first pick these cards, either one, they have 3 circles on them, these assets, you can improve them. They usually have one colored in to begin with, and the other 2 already had them by default, but the hound didn't. So I picked Sharp. When you gather information with your hound to track or investigate a scene, you add +1 and take +1 momentum if you get a hit, if you succeed. Momentum, we'll talk about when we play the game, but it's an important stat that you can use to basically improve your die rolls. His second, I thought this made complete sense, and I got the idea for this by, I randomly pulled out cards, and 2 of the 3 I pulled out ended up not fitting, but this one actually does. Outcast. He's an outcast from his society, so when his supply is reduced to 0, basically when he runs out of supplies, he can lose momentum instead of supply, so he doesn't suffer the out of supply penalty, which makes things harder as you go if you're totally out of supply. And then finally, he's a skirmisher. He has a spear and a shield. There is a shield talent, a shield combat talent, but you can only take 3 of these. And I thought Outcast was much more important for him to have, and the Hound to begin with, than the shield. So he's got a shield, but it just doesn't really have a mechanical impact yet. So if he wields a spear, which he's going to start the game with, when you face danger by holding a foe at bay with your spear's reach, you can roll +iron or +edge. If you score a hit, you can either strike or add momentum. So this tells us that iron and edge are going to be important. So I think this character is a pretty good fighter. He's a hunter. I think he's going to end up with a lot of iron. Heart, though, is a really important characteristic, and I think he might want to be very high in that. We might want him to be high in that as well. I do think his shadow is going to be low, so we're going to give him a 2 in shadow. And I think he's not going to be as fast as he is strong, so we're definitely going to have a 3 in edge. And he's not dumb. I'm trying to line this up here, and it doesn't want to do it. He's not dumb, but he's not super smart either, so I'm just going to give him a 2 in wits. And so the question I have now is, do I want him to have a higher heart or a higher iron? I feel like he's not a trained soldier. I think he's really more heart, right? This is a guy who's brave and strong and is willing to go hunt a beast that almost killed him before. So I like the idea of him having a really high heart. Heart is great for relationships, and he's going to probably need that because he's going to need to form bonds. Another way that you succeed at things at the game, like when you get to the end of the game, how many bonds you've checked off determines, when you go to write your epilogue, how successful your life has been. So he's going to need bonds as well. So we're pretty much done with the character sheet. We've just got to do an inciting incident. We know what the background vow is. We always start with 5 health, 5 spirit, and 5 supply. And then you start with 2 momentum, but it can go up to 10. And its baseline is 2, but you can spend it down to 0. And the way momentum works is, I'm going to say, like, say you roll the dice and you see that the challenge dice are 7, right? If you have 7 momentum, you can burn the momentum down to 0 and 0 out that challenge die so that it doesn't count. And so you want to do things that build momentum so that you can get rid of a bad result and go from either a miss to a weak hit or a weak hit to a strong hit. So that's the way it works. I've got all of the moves in Ironsworn written out here. Moves are how you play the game in Ironsworn. You envision a narrative. My character is going to try and attack this creature. Then you do the move that is appropriate, like strike or clash. And then you roll the dice to see if you're successful. And if you are successful, you inflict harm on the enemy, or you compel the person to do what you want, or you manage to make camp successfully, or whatever it happens to be. So when we play, which we won't do this session, that will become a little more obvious. All right, so the next thing I want to do is come up with a settlement. So let's go here quickly. So I said that this character has been kind of ostracized from his town. So what I've decided as I thought about it is that he's a hunter, and he used to, during the hunting season, he would go and follow the hunter's trail into the mountains and the forests, and he would hunt. And then there's a hunter's lodge that a lot of hunters use, and it's sort of like a way station. They come and go. And there's sort of an elderly couple and their nephew who stay at this lodge. I don't know their names yet. And they've got a barn in the back where you can stable your horse, and they've got a cow for milk, and they've got a mule to carry burdens, and they've got a garden and a well and some chickens and a chicken coop. And so they kind of live here in the hunting lodge, and almost like it's a bed and breakfast, right? And then hunters come and go throughout the year. Some go in the winter, some in the summer. And basically they run it almost like an inn, right? And the hunters come, and their payment is just, here you can have, you know, a side of the deer that I hunted and help me dress it, and then I'll bring the rest of the preserved deer to the town, right, and sell it, and that sort of thing. Or I'll give you part of the pelt. And so the man who runs this hunting lodge, whose name we haven't determined yet, is one of Wiglaf's bonds. You get to mark 3 bonds. And he's a friend of Wiglaf's, and consequently, Wiglaf was allowed to stay in this old cabin up in the woods. And it was just an old shack that used to be the hunting lodge before they built the nicer hunting lodge. And so it's kind of decrepit. It's up there in the back, up the hills, in the woods. Most of the other hunters don't like him, so he doesn't hang out at the lodge too much unless there's nobody there except the family that runs it. So now we need to do a couple of things. So the hunting lodge I randomly rolled is called Red Hall. So I like that name as a hunting lodge. And so if we go to bonds, right, one of the things we're going to do is we're going to mark bonds. So the first bond that we have for our player character is Red Hall. Okay, and Wiglaf is friends with the owners and known to the animals of Redhall. So that's the first bond that we're going to mark. And then the second bond is going to be with the character who owns Redhall. So now we need to go to one of the oracles. So for example, we want to create this NPC, and we're going to need to make a name and so on. So we're going to go to the NPC, and I'm going to add a new page, and we've got to create a name. So amongst the oracles, there are Ironlander names, and so I'm just going to roll the D100, and it's 93. So his name is Non, right? So then we're just going to go back to the NPCs, and we're going to call this guy Nan here, right? And his role is the lodge owner of Redhall. And then you can give him a goal. And so his goal, or sorry, that's the role. I made a mistake. The goal is 24, to harm a rival. So I don't know what that's going to be like. We'll have to figure that out. His disposition to our character, we already know is friendly. We're not going to roll that because it's part of our background. And then his descriptor, I'm going to actually make him old. And his activity, you can roll for these, but I think for this we're going to pick, just to make this sort of appropriate to the story we're constructing. So his activity will be maybe preserving. Okay, preserving the hall. And his location is Redhall. And his relationships is he is a friend of Wiglaf. One of the things I like about OneNote is you can just easily make links like that. And so we've now constructed our first NPC, right? And then we can go back to our player character and go to his bonds, and we will have Nan, owner, whoops, spelled it wrong, owner of Redhall. And then Nan's wife will be his other bond. So we're going to create a new NPC, and we're going to go back to the Ironlander names. And we're going to roll. I'm going to roll on the second table. I was supposed to actually, let's roll randomly. So 1 to 5 is the left table. 9, so it's the right table. And we get an 11, and that is Owena, is the wife. So Owena. And her role is going to be, I don't know, gardener, right? Because she gardens. And her goal is going to be to raise crops. And her disposition will be friendly. And then let's look for a descriptor for her. Let's say kind. And again, I'm not rolling these because these are our starting bonds. And her activity will be gardening. And her location is Redhall. And she is the wife of Nan. And friends with Wiglaf. Okay. So we now have our bonds, and I'll mark the bonds offline, but basically you create like a single slash for 1 bond, another slash for 2 bonds, a third slash for 3 bonds, and with 4 bonds you fill the box. So what I might do is just partially color the boxes in instead of doing slashes, because slashes are going to be really hard to do with the mouse. So we've got our bonds, and that's really important. Now, the other thing we need to do with settlements is we need to create a new settlement that's going to be the town, right? So let's look up settlement names, and I'm going to use the quick settlement name generator. And this is the town that's, a day's ride or so away. And so our prefix is going to be 98 long, and our suffix is going to be 33, Long Haven. So that is the name of the town, Long Haven. And this is going to be the town of Wiglaf's birth, and where he has been accused of murdering Honshu. Okay. So now if we go back to Wiglaf, so this is the player character sheet, but I also have some other stuff. There's a nice picture of him from Hero Forge. Personality, he's driven to get revenge and regain his honor. He's thin-skinned. When he's accused unjustly or his honor is besmirched, he doesn't like that. He's stubborn, especially when everyone is against him. So because the whole town thinks he's a murderer, he's even more stubborn about, yes, I saw this beast. His motivations are to seek revenge against the monster, to regain his honor, and to gain acceptance by his people. And I've got some equipment. He's got an iron-tipped spear, wooden shield, bronze dagger, and so on. He's equipped for travel, and he's a hunter, so, and he's got a dog, so he's in pretty good shape when it comes to that kind of thing. He should be a good explorer. Now, to set this up, we need two other things. We need an inciting incident, and we're going to need to make up the monster. So before we do the inciting incident, I want to make up the monstrosity. So I'm going to duplicate this page. And we're going to give this thing, we're just going to call it name. I think I know what we're going to call it. First, we have to create its size. Now, the thing about monstrosities is that they can be any size, but I feel like this thing should not be tiny or small. So I'm going to reject any roll below 30 or 31. We'll see how big this thing is. And we get a 69. It is large or giant sized. Okay, so if we go back to this creature, it is large, giant sized. Its primary form, and this is a land creature, so I'm going to reject anything that is aquatic sounding. Its primary form is 25, a bird form. Okay, I like that. So it's bird-like. So it's got feathers and wings. And so now you roll on the characteristics table 4 times, and you pick 3 that seem to work. So what we've got here is 9. I'm just going to type these in here, which is fangs or rows of sharp teeth. So let's say fangs. So it's got a fanged mouth despite being a bird, maybe. 68 is mandibles or pincers. Okay, well that's not going to work with fangs, so only one of them is going to work, I think. 53, it is many-eyed. Wow, okay. And is this 88? Yeah, 88 is semi-transparent. Wow. All right, so I think we're going to get rid of the mandibles. So it is a fanged, many-eyed, semi-transparent bird. So this is a bird that can like turn invisible. So even though it has a beak, it's actually got teeth inside of its beak, which is pretty sick. And now we do the same thing for abilities. So let's figure out the abilities. Its first ability is 24, so that is Powerful Bite, which makes sense. Okay. Its second ability is 81, and that is Control Lesser Creatures. That means it could mind control the dog, I guess. So maybe this thing can control other birds. Oh, you know what? Bird-like? Maybe it's not a bird. Maybe it's like a velociraptor. I think that sounds really cool. Or like an Archaeopteryx or something. Okay, 19 is swift. Okay. And then the last one is 20, which is also swift. So let's roll again. 96. Create illusions. Wow. I actually don't like that one. I like swift, powerful bite, and control lesser creatures. So now I'm thinking this, if you've ever seen like Jurassic World, where they created the Indominus Rex from raptor DNA, and this thing was able to control the raptors. So now I'm thinking maybe we're going to have something like that. So powerful bite, control lesser creatures, and swift. So I actually think this is going to be like a velociraptor. Right? Some kind of a... But with multiple eyes, semi-transparent, right? It's camouflaged like the... it's camouflaged like the Indominus Rex, right? So I'm thinking a very Indominus Rex kind of vibe. Maybe it's got some feathers. I don't know. So it's velociraptor-like, but flies and feathered. Okay. And so it's a giant bird dragon. I don't know. That sounds pretty horrifying. And it's got multiple eyes. I really like that. And a powerful bite. So semi-transparent, let's say camouflage. Right? Like a chameleon. Powerful bite, swift, controls lesser creatures. This all sounds like kind of like an Indominus Rex, but I think we're going to call it Grendel, right? Enemy of Beowulf. So this thing is either Grendel or a Grendel, and this is his enemy. So now we can go back here, and he wants to slay. Typed that wrong. He wants to slay Grendel. And clear my name. And that is an epic enemy, right? And the rank of this guy, because I didn't write the rank down, but his rank, whoops, no, wrong thing. His rank is, put it here, whoops, just put it over here for now. Rank, epic, which makes him much harder to fight. So we have a giant-sized velociraptor. I mean, I really think this is going to be the Indominus, whatever, Indominus Rex, like fanged. I might ditch the many-eyed and go with something else. I'll have to think about it. But I really like this idea that basically this thing, this giant raptor-like dinosaur, was camouflaged in the woods. And these guys were out hunting, and this thing came on them and just attacked and raked its claws across Wiglaf and hurt him, and then just ate his friend and spit out the bones. And it totally destroyed the friend Hanshu. So I really like that. I think that's a pretty cool idea. We also now know the name of the town. He's from Longhaven. So we will put that in here. So Wiglaf of Longhaven. And I think at this point, our character is ready to go. We just need an inciting incident. So what I'm going to do here is settlement trouble. So Longhaven has got a settlement trouble. And we're going to go back to the oracles. And we're going to roll on this. And we'll see if this gives us an idea of what the inciting incident could be. Otherwise, I have a couple of other ideas. So let's roll it out. 69. And that is reckless warmongering. Okay, so that is what's going on here. So I suspect that maybe the town leader is trying to raise an army and attack a nearby settlement. But I'm not sure that that's going to work for the inciting incident. So let's go back to our world truths. And I want to look at, is it leaders? No. So in the dead of winter, a desperate man arrives at a snowbound steading. He is wounded and hungry and nearly frozen to death. His family has been taken. By whom will you be brave enough? So this is going to be our inciting incident, right? So we're going to go ahead and just go ahead and highlight this and go back to the character and click on inciting incident. And I'm going to paste without formatting. So I guess it is winter. So in the dark of winter, just as the sun starts to return, right? So the sun's just peeked over the horizon for just a little while. A desperate man arrives in a snowbound steading. He's wounded and hungry. His family has been taken. By whom will you brave the merciless winter to save them? So what's going to happen is he's wounded and hungry. His family has been taken. By whom? And we say Wiglaf swears an iron vow to brave the merciless winter to save them. And so that is going to be our iron vow, is going to be to save the man's family, a desperate man named. So let's see what his name will be. Back to the oracles, and we're going to look for Ironlander names. And again, 1 to 5 is on the left, 2, so we are on the left, and we roll 99. Sabine. So it is a man named Sabine. And I will work on him offline. I will create a character sheet for him and put him with the NPCs. So Sabine, this man, probably was a hunter or something, and he arrives at the at Red Hall. It's snowbound. You get to see what a bad typist I am. Red Hall. He's wounded and hungry and nearly frozen to death. His family has been taken. By whom Wiglaf swears an iron vow. So the man stumbles into the steading, and it's the dead of winter. There aren't any hunters. So Wiglaf has trudged with his dog from his cabin the couple of 100 feet through waist-high snow to the hall, right, the hunting lodge, where they've got a big cook fire going and they've got a fireplace, and Nan and Owena are sitting there having dinner with him, and it's pitch dark because it's always dark, and then the sun peeks over the horizon right around noon just for a little bit, a minute or two, and in that dim light they hear a grinding noise. Somebody's rattling at the door, somebody starts knocking. Griff, the dog, starts barking and barking and barking. And so Wiglaf picks up his spear, and Nan picks up his axe, and they go to the door, and the dog is kind of growling, but they open the door, and this snow-encrusted man collapses in, face pale with cold, hands frostbitten, nearly frozen to death. And they bring him over to the fire, and they thaw him out, and Nan gives him some hot tea or something, and he then says, my family was taken. We don't know by whom yet. We're going to have to figure that out. But Wiglaf's holding his spear, so he grabs the iron tip of his spear shaft and says, I will save them. Tell me what happened. And what happened, we will find out when we start to play. So that's our inciting incident. And we can then put that on our character sheet, that the inciting incident is find Sabine's missing family. Right, and of course, hearing that a family went missing in the winter immediately makes Wiglaf think of Grendel, this massive giant thing that's 15 feet tall, clawed, fanged, has 4 eyes and whip-like tail and wings, and can fly and can attack from nowhere because it's camouflage, and can even control the other raptor-like creatures that are smaller from the woods and make them attack and that sort of thing. And so that's how we're going to start. So that's the end of this session 0. We're ready to begin Ironsworn. It's a lot longer than I thought it was going to take, but hopefully you found that interesting and informative. And in the next session, we will start our actual play. Until next time, I am Scrapperlock, and this has been Ironsworn, Antarctica.